how to make long atlatl spears out of short sticks the right way. We're doing it right now. Hey guys, Ryan Gill here with Hunt Primitive, where we entertain, educate, and inspire. And on this channel we do mostly primitive build and hunting videos, and this one's going to be a build video, but if it's your first time following along, do please consider subscribing. And what we're going to be talking about today is actually taking short sticks like this and turning them into very long atlatl spears, conjoining them together the right way. The different ways you can do it, there are a few slight variances, but there's one thing that they all have in common, and that is the lap joint. The lap joint is an extremely old method of wood joinery. That's where one side is tapered, the other side is tapered on two sticks, and we're going to lay them together to make the piece whole again, and they will be glued together with pitch glue and then wrapped with sinew. And this is archaeologically supported that there are a lot of bone and ivory pieces that are joined together, especially for foreshafts or extensions, as we'll talk about later. Wood obviously does not usually stand up to the long test of time, and so that way you're going to see a lot less of it. But by utilizing the same exact process with wood, we're able to take very short ones. So I get asked a fair amount of times from people on my channel, say, hey, I don't live in an area where I have river cane like you do, very long river cane, or I don't have, we live out in the desert and we don't have, big tall shrubs that I can pull long shafts out of. So if I only got little short ones, I guess I just have to throw little short atlatls, and that's not the case at all. You can make a nice full-length atlatl set just from small sticks being put together with the lap joint, and we're going to show you how to do that lap joint here in a few minutes. Now, I do want to cover a couple more things before we do that. Is I have also seen where this seems to be a popular idea until you do it, and that's where you take two pieces that are more or less squared off, this one's not, and you stuff them together, and then you put like a sleeve of bone or drill through a piece of wood or something, and you're trying to put a sleeve, like you're talking about PVC couplings and putting them together. The problem is they do tend to work around quite a bit, and then you've also got a great big coupling in there, and it's not nearly as strong as you think it is. I've done quite a bit of that. I'm not saying that you can't do it, and it's never ever been done, but the lap joint is by far stronger. It doesn't seem like it would be, but it absolutely is. It is by far stronger. Here's one that is completely finished out. By far stronger, and just overall more reliable, and honestly, it's easier. So when you're talking about not overcomplicating the system, Primitive Man did not want to overcomplicate it. He wanted something good that was fast and efficient, and that is exactly what the lap joint is. Alright, now if we're going to talk about how to stick the pieces together. Do you use the fat end? Do you use the skinny end? And it all depends. You can use a lot of different ideas, and there's no one way to do it. So I've experimented with quite a few, and there's a lot of different things that work. Now, this stuff can be found absolutely throughout prehistory, but you're going to be talking about thousands of miles of difference and thousands of different people, millions of different people, lots of different materials, different regions. So all of this has absolutely been done, and honestly I would not be the least bit surprised to take a peer back into Primitive Man and see all of these methods being used even in the same time frames. Perhaps not the foreshaft technology per se, but joining big ends to little ends, and we're going to get to that here as well. But before I do touch on that, I did want to mention about socketing foreshafts, and that is something that we covered in a video a while back, and I will drop a link down in the description to that. We did these with stone drills and worked out really, really well, and it naturally tapers with the stone drill, and it also grooves the inside because of the way the stone is chipped. It's not a smooth socket like you would see with a modern drill. It's grooved, and that gives it a lot of tension and really binds that in there without having to go very deep at all. You can see it's only in there a few centimeters, but it holds it very securely. Now, if you wanted to do that in the middle to join them together, it's a poor decision, because while it works good on these short sections, they work around a little bit too much, and it doesn't take much for them to get wonky. Okay, so it's not a good method overall to socket shafts together. Again, can it plausibly be done? Sure, but there's definitely better ways to do it. Again, the lap joint. So alright, now big ends versus the little ends, how do you put them together? This one here is utilizing two pieces that are about 4 feet long to make about an 8-foot spear, and it is great. Now this one's not fletched yet, but I actually have thrown it. It does rather well. I'm going to test and tune all of this stuff in a different video, so definitely make sure you're following along, but it's too much information just for this one. But I'll show you how to balance them with the Atlatl thrower in itself, as well as what fletching does to aid in the accuracy and flight dynamics, and then also how to choose the correct length. So follow along for that video coming in the future. But as far as joining them together, this one is joined together on the fat end, and so it tapers out skinny on both sides. So it's almost more reminiscent of a javelin per se, but what it does is it gives us a much stiffer center section. So as we throw this and it flexes with the normal paradox that we see with throwing Atlatls or even shooting arrows, we have a thicker body, and so it's a little tougher and more resilient, as opposed to having little spindly things, you know, the two fat ends put together. Now that's something that you don't really want to do. Just take the two skinny ends and put those together. Now what you can do is size it properly to where you can actually take the thick end, or here's the thin end, so that's going to be the knock end. We're going to fletch that. And then this side, this one's probably all about 4 foot long. My other section's not 4 feet, but let me find it here. And this one is taking the thick end and on a shorter stick, so this one's probably only 2.5, 3 feet long. And this utilizes the thin end, and then it continues to get bigger. So what I'm going to do is, it's, instead of being fat in the middle and then tapering out, it's continuing to get bigger, and I'm taking the same diameter and we're going to put these together. And then on this side, because it's so much fatter, what we can actually do is then drill it out and implement this same foreshaft technology. So that'll actually gain us another, 6, 8, 10, 12 inches, whatever we want to use for the foreshaft. And that'll give us extra length and give us the detachable foreshaft, where something like this, that's the one that's the fat pieces that are conjoined together and it's tapered on both sides, this is not a good one to use for a foreshaft unless you use another lap jointed foreshaft, but then it's not really removable. It's still a foreshaft, and you can add some length if you really needed to. This one's plenty long, we don't have to. This would be a good example of one that you could mount the point directly to the spear shaft itself. So lots of different ways you can do this. So on this one, like I said, we're going to go ahead and take the fat end, marry it to a skinny end that's the same diameter, and then it's going to continue to get fatter, and then I'm going to drill this one out for a foreshaft. And so we'll have a compound spear, 2 pieces of wood, foreshafted, making 3 pieces of wood in a very reliably good reliable throwing spear. So then the other ways that you may want to consider doing this is, okay, worst case scenario, you don't even have sticks that are 4 foot long or 3 foot long, quite honestly, but I think you should be able to. Now, what kind of woods are you looking for? It doesn't matter. Just about any wood's going to really work for you, but I really prefer hardwoods over softwoods. So stuff like willow, yes, it can work. Definitely not my favorite. If you have willow, you probably also have red osier, and it's going to have like a red skin on it like this, and it's going to be growing all around the creek bottoms and stuff, like where you'd see the willow, and that is going to be a little bit harder, also kind of known as dogwood or western dogwood, and that's going to make a little bit better of a spear for you in the shorter lengths that you can put together. So absolute worst case scenario, you could take a few that are 2.5 foot long, that are various, maybe one that's a little bit thicker overall, have that in the middle. You could actually splice one on each side and make it a 3-piece that's a lap jointed, and that would work as well. But also keep in mind, the more joints you have, the more opportunity you do have for failure. But given a situation where you don't have large sticks to work with, it's a great alternative. Now, in primitive times, do you think that they would just simply have, you know, one method? Okay, we're going to do all of them exactly like this. And the answer is probably not, unless you have great resources. If you have great resources, then you're probably not going to have a joint at all. You're just going to have all the long ones like this one. This is a full-length stick, and this is about 7.5 feet long with the replaceable foreshaft, makes it a little bit longer. And that is one solid natural stick. So you could be walking along and see a guy that's got one of these because he found a really good one, but he doesn't have a whole plethora of these. So then his next one you're going to see may very well be put together like this. And in some cases he might have a preference to say, okay, well, I like to have it get bigger later in time. Perhaps they start using the drilled out foreshafts. Then that may change the spear construction, right? Because now you want a bigger end so you can drill it out. And that's actually a little bit more efficient because you can keep swapping out new points and try to save your spear. But you might find a guy that has a couple sticks that they just don't really work for that, but they work pretty good if you put them together this way. And so you could walk along and just see a whole mixture of anything if you're in a place that doesn't have great resources. Obviously, if you have great resources, you're going to do what is favorite to you, what you have the best luck with, what's most practical to you. That's what you're going to build. Lots of different ways to do it. Use your imagination. That's the important part. Now let's get in close and let's put this lap joint together so you can actually see how it joins. And then these spears will be done, and I'll see you on the next video after. So hang around, don't run off yet, because we're going to put it together. But after that, remember to keep following along, because we're going to take a lot of these and we're going to go throw them, and we're going to show you how to test and tune per your Atlatl, your thrower itself. So follow along to see that one in another video. Alright, let's show you putting these couple pieces here together. So I'm chewing sinew at the same time, just to show you it won't be enough to finish the whole project. I'll do that off camera. Once I show you how to do it, it's pretty easy after that. So if it sounds like I'm talking funny, it's because I'm chewing sinew. So hopefully you can see that. You see how that's tapered out. Now it's also cross-hatched in there. Hopefully you can see that. And that's really important to do because it gives a better biting surface overall for your glue joint. And that is seen in artifacts, a lot of artifacts, that these lap joints are scarred for that very reason. Now, there is the alternative method to this where you also cut a little bit of it where it comes down and it makes a shelf on either side. In this way, the idea is that it can't lip up over the shaft, or lip up over the side of the shaft and skip out. And I've experimented with that quite a bit, so I know somebody's out there saying, well, if you make it come down to a shelf where it bottoms out, it can't move. That I really don't see archaeological evidence for, and so it made me want to continue experimenting without it. And even though I did it for quite a while, I've had so much luck without that, because these things are totally going to be bound together and they can't slide because the bindings are going to be holding it, so that if you put these together and you pinch them, and you don't have to pinch them even very hard, but you force them together, you can't get them to move. So it's amazing how just a little bit of a pinch, they are very, very solid. So that's why I don't care about doing the lip at the bottom. Let's get these things put together and then wrap it. We'll finish it out and we'll go from there. Okay, so we got pitch glue. Obviously it's heat activated. There's just a little fire off camera here, and just going to start heating up that pitch. Actually, what we're going to do is lean over and heat the wood up, because we don't want to shock the hot pitch hitting the cold wood, because that's going to not give us a good glue line. So once you heat that up, then you can heat your pitch. And this does not matter at all if it's messy or pretty. You want a lot of glue on here. We'll squeeze extra glue out later. And yes, you could use, a hide glue in this if you really wanted to. Hide glue is, at least in my experience, I'm not a big hide glue person anyway, but hide glue is relatively thin and runny at times. And so it does make good glue for certain projects, but this is also a little bit of a gap filler. And also, this is very easily heated back up. So if you break this joint loose, it's still wrapped with sinew, but you broke the pitch loose, all you have to do is gently heat that area and it'll soften the pitch and reset itself. That's one of the reasons that I really prefer using pitch glue. About used up all our pitch on that one. Okay, I'll set that up to dry. So now we have our two pieces. Now what we're going to do is, instead of trying to cram them together, just reactivate the glue, keep heating it up till it's just about runny and drippy. And then we're going to marry those right together, work it back and forth, really get that glue to set with itself. You're going to want to kind of lick your fingers or wet your fingers so the stuff doesn't stick to you as easily. And you're going to squeeze that down and try to line it up the best that you can, and then hold it. Don't worry about cleaning that excess off right now. Just get that joint really set together well, like you want it. Now this may take some practice because you know, when you look down the shaft, it could still very well be crooked. But as it starts to cool and stops moving around so easy, remember, we can always heat this back up, right? Now you can very gently look down it and start making your alterations to straighten it out, which I just did. So I just did that. It's not a big deal. You can work with it. It's going to be tacky for a little bit. And we're going to let all of this really cool down. We want the inside to be cool. The outside's already getting, you know, it's still soft, but it's cooling down for sure. And then periodically too, like I said, stop and readjust as it dries and cools. In fact, I think I want to slide it out a little bit. Really get a feel for it after you've done a few. And that's drying up nice. Take a nice step back and look at it. Yeah, it looks really good. So, see if you can kind of see. Join those together pretty well. Needs a little bit of adjustment, but not too much. Okay, now, anything that we can just kind of peel off while it's still puttied, we can go ahead and do that. Some of it's getting a little hard. And it'll still walk around on you right now, remember too, because if this stuff is still soft, the stuff on the inside is still soft too. But as it cools, it'll really stiffen itself up. Now you don't want to just sit and abuse the thing either before it's wrapped with sinew, because then it'll just pop apart. It will get brittle and break. So we're going to take that pitch, nice sticky stuff, and stick it right back on our pitch stick. Okay, straighten it back out again and have a look. Looks good. We can always heat different pieces of the wood too. Remember, we can come up here later, heat this and tweak it a little bit to straighten it out, because you do want these very straight. So, okay, I think we're getting to that point now where if we just start heating, we don't want to heat all of this. All we're trying to do is soften the outside so we can kind of smear some of this smooth. So if you heat the thing too much, again, your joint's just going to come apart. It's kind of like you want to flash heat it almost. So just the outside of it gets tacky again. So you know it's really tacky when it's sticking all over you. So take our sinew, and you want to do it tight. You don't have to run way up. That's not going to do anything. Just go a tiny bit past the feathering out of your lap joint. And you do want to wrap it relatively tight. Now sinew does tighten as it dries. So that's, you know, you'd say, well, you can wrap it loose and it will tighten. That's right. But shoot, if you have enough that you can pull it tight, and it'll tighten up even more as it dries, that is a good problem to have. Alright, got some more sinew chewed up. I got one more piece in my mouth. So we're going to continue that and pull it a little too hard, too quick. You're going to pull it pretty hard, overlap the last piece that you wrapped, just so it doesn't unwind. it will have multiple spots that unwind and can start. You'll just have one end that could potentially unwind if you got it started. But you can put a little glue on that as well. Pull it tight, wrap it around. And I got one more piece here. And that should do it. Actually, split it because it wants to split. And see how I'm overlapping where I just was. The last one that feathered out was right there. And by doing that, now you just bound it down. And I also started over here, so that's just like a little tip for you. See, it starts out here. If you just keep wrapping it coiled, then you could come along and you could pick up the edge and it could accidentally unravel. You know, you catch it on a thorn or something. But by continuing to wrap it over itself, there's nowhere for it to unravel in the future. And then of course the only place it could potentially unravel is the last spot, but we can glue that down pretty good afterwards. We can coat that with pitch glue or whatever, and it'll stay pretty darn strong. So that's pretty much all it needs right there. If you find that it does come apart a little bit too easy for you, you can always go over it with another wrapping of sinew, but continuing to just mound it up is probably not going to do a whole lot for you. The important thing to remember is just go slightly past the two mating surfaces, because wrapping it up here, remember, it's not a cut-in slot, so it's not going to split the shaft, so you don't have to worry about that. But make sure that every time you wrap this, that they're just slightly overlapping one another, and then as they dry, they will shrink out a little bit, and it's okay if there's a couple little tiny gaps. But again, the idea is you want this to just kind of bind itself together as it wraps, if that makes sense. So here it is. It's all done, joined together. Now I do need to go reheat. You can see it's got a little bit of a bow in there from where it was. So let's go ahead and put it over the fire. Doing a little bit of heating that up. Now you see how it actually starts drawing the pitch. Now I can move it just a little bit. Doesn't take much. Looks really good. I'll show it to you. See, I got rid of that bow pretty much. I mean, it's a couple teeny tinies for a long length of two sticks we put together. That's pretty straight. But you can see that it starts to bubble the pitch up and out. Remember, that's because we squeeze that thing really tight. And of course, even as we heat it, that you don't want to put it right in the open flame, because that will actually start to torch and curl the ends of your sinew. So what you really want to do is, actually let me rub this while it's still tacky. Lick your fingers so it doesn't stick to you as bad. But just go ahead and rub that into the sinew. But what you do is you put it over the just hot coals without an open flame. And see, right there is that little tail end where we were done wrapping. So I'm going to make sure I really putty that over good and it'll stick. But just heat it over the coals, and you'll notice as it shrinks down, it starts to actually draw that pitch up. And that's a good thing to kind of happen. And then you can go along afterwards as well and put a light smearing of pitch over all of this, and that will also help keep it waterproof. But that's that. I'm going to heat up a teeny bit right here. You might be able to see when I spin it. There's a tiny little bow, and if I heat that up and tweak it, we're going to have a really nice straight atlatl shaft. So this is going to be nice and strong, not as strong necessarily as a one solid piece, but it's going to be good anyway. Alright guys, hey, thanks for following along. And there's our fresh lap joint right there. Looks great. New spear out of short sticks. So what we're doing, we're going to let this thing really cure itself out. Let that sinew really dry up good for, a couple hours. You don't want to put it directly in the sun, because remember that direct heat over time will melt down your pitch glue and it'll start going wonky again. So that's something you always have to remember with your primitive stuff, is you never just lay it. I mean, it's okay to lay stuff while it's drying in the sun, but long term, if you let this stuff just lay, it's going to get soft on you and they're going to start getting a little bit wonky. So always when you set down your primitive hunting gear, whether while you're building it or you're on the hunt, set it down in the shade. So the sun, especially summertime, you get some intense heat, some big UV down here, especially in Florida. And I even know out west how hot that sun was before. It'll melt that pitch glue in a second. So Thanks for following along. Make sure you are following along with the channel for the next video. If the video's done and you're watching this later, I will drop it in the description. But if you're just watching this video brand new and it's just came out, that video's not done yet. You're gonna have to wait about another week, but we'll get her done. So thanks for following along, and we'll catch you on that next adventure.